or it can be running on large servers supporting various websites that have millions of visitors per day, etc. Okay, and this is what I really like about Python. It allows you to do some interactive data analysis. Okay, and so we have written one code for this interactive data analysis, and at the end of this talk, I will show you a live demo of how the interactive data analysis works and how it can actually save you a lot of time and a lot of space in terms of saving figures, etc. Last but not the least, Python is free. Okay, and this is important because many times your students may have some experience of and also inclination towards using MATLAB for whatever reasons. That is also true here at IIT Bombay. Our undergrads somehow like to use MATLAB, but they need to be told that a lot of things that they do in MATLAB or any other commercial software for that matter can be very easily done in a free software. And why is that important? Well, while you're at an educational institute which is paying for the license of a commercial software, it doesn't matter. But once you go out in industry, very few companies can actually afford to pay for commercial license of things such as Python or JMP, the statistical software, right? So it is very important to know how to use tools that are free. And well, if you really run into limits of those free tools, then sure, you can use, and it's perfectly fine to use commercial software at that point of time. But trust me, there are very few applications where it is truly needed. It is whenever people use commercial software, it's simply because they're just used to doing that, right? So Python is free and it will remain free. That's actually a very big plus point about Python, right? So anyway, so now to run you through this features of Python, Professor Pallavi Nayak was very kind to share with me a data set which is related to placements at SPIT. Okay, I think one class, MBA class, and I'm going to use that data set to talk about the different insights which we can learn using Python and data exploration. Okay, so first we have to start with asking some interesting questions. Okay, here are some of the questions. So, for example, the students who are coming in for an MBA program, the first question on their mind would be, what is the typical salary am I going to get after graduating from this place, right? Then, well, there can be some monitoring committees who may be looking at things such as, well, is there a gender bias in the packages offered to male or female students, okay? Then there can be a generic question that is of interest, like what really determines the salary that people get, right? So a student may be interested to maximize his or her salary by engaging in certain kinds of activities or maximizing their scores in certain tests, etc., or choosing a specialization which results in a higher salary. So these kinds of questions are important. And last is things such as who is most likely to not get a campus placement, so that people you can identify such candidates before and start working on them, so that they can either they can develop some skills or start exploring other options, right? So this kind of insight is actually very useful to have, and I have used that data set to answer some of these questions that I have posted on this slide here. Okay, so these are going to be our steps. Actually, these are the generic steps that are involved in data analysis and exploration, but the ones that I have highlighted in blue are the ones that I'm going to be talking about. And this is because the first step or first two steps here, right? Checking raw data and doing error correction, data cleaning, this thing is actually very important. In fact, it takes the most amount of time for real data sets, but it's also one of the most boring things to do as far as the end users are concerned. So in this case, if you want to look at the features of Python or the power of Python, then this data cleaning business is not very useful. Also, we just have, I think, 1.5 hours or so. So I had to prioritize. So I'm not going to talk about data cleaning, although it's very important, I would say, because real data sets are messy. And they have missing data, they have wrong data, all kinds of things happen. And in fact, what I have observed is that I think 50% of the time is actually spent in just cleaning the raw data and putting it in a form where it is analyzable. And the analysis after that is actually quite straightforward. Okay. So we'll take a data set that is clean, okay, and then we will look at how to get an overview of that data set. There will be different columns in the data set and several rows. Then we'll spend a lot of time on visual exploration of the data, okay, and I'm calling it manual exploration because you need to see the image, okay, in order to get a feel of it. Then we'll also talk about interactive visualization. What I won't really talk about is the prediction and statistical analysis and things such as regression or machine learning. These are slightly advanced for people who haven't done these things before, but these are also not necessary. What is really important is to get a visual feel of your data. And even if you are into machine learning and other things, you still need to get a visual feel of data, because if you just blindly run some algorithms, they are always going to give you some output, but it is the human who is looking at that data. That human has to take a decision on whether these things make sense or not, right? You can get lost. You can very easily get lost into the details of the algorithms and their implementation, but eventually somebody has to make sure that the data makes sense and it is not spitting out spurious results. So getting a visual feel of the data or manual feel of the data is something that I would like to stress, and is something I'm going to focus on this presentation. Okay. All right, so this completes my presentation, and I'm going to go to the Jupyter Notebook. Before that, I'm just going to look at if there are any questions that I need to take right now. Not really. Okay. So by the way, if you have any question during the presentation, feel free to just write it in the chat. And if I think that the question is relevant and needs to be addressed immediately, I'll do so. Otherwise, we'll try to address these questions at the end of the talk. Okay. All right, so now I have changed the tabs. I'm showing you something called as a Jupyter Notebook. Okay, as you can see, I'm actually using my web browser here, right? This is Google Chrome. I haven't really opened up any kind of software. It's just a web browser, right? So Jupyter Notebook is something that lets you write Python code in a web browser, and it also lets you write or get the results in real time right below your Python code. So this is actually very useful for for testing and for verifying someone else's work and so on, right? So this is called Jupyter Notebook. Jupyter is spelled slightly differently here. All right, so I have installed Jupyter Notebook and Python 3 on. In this case, it's an Ubuntu machine, but you could also install it fairly easily on a Windows machine as well. Okay, so I won't talk about the installation stuff because that's not very exciting. But let's just get started on how it looks like. Okay, so I'm not just going to show you code. Okay, by the way, I'm going to actually change some of these things around in the code, and depending on that, the outputs are going to change. So and I'll come to that part. So please bear with me for just a few minutes before while I explain these things. So this is just standard stuff. It is just importing some libraries. Okay, so just so that you know, we are going to be mainly using two libraries here. Okay, first is the Pandas library, and second is the Seaborn library. Seaborn is a library used for plotting, and Pandas is a library used for data handling and manipulation. And I'm using latest version of Seaborn, and I think a fairly recent version of Pandas as well. Okay, this is important because what happens is that if I give you this code, which I'm going to give Professor Pallavi Nair a copy of this particular Jupyter Notebook. But whether the code works or not also depends on what kind of versions you have for these packages, right? So we have Pandas package and Seaborn package that we're using, and also NumPy, but that's not very critical here. So these are the versions that I'm using, and as long as you're using this version or a better or a more recent one, it should work. But it may or may not work if your version is an earlier version. Okay. All right. So let's start with this. Like the very first thing that Python does is actually very different than Excel. Okay. What it does is, so you're probably seeing this piece of code, right? So this is the code, and this here is the output. Okay, this is the output, and this is the code. So what it is doing is that it is saying path. So this is where my file is saved. Placements.csv is the file, and CSV file is basically like an Excel file. Okay, you can also open the CSV file using Excel. And so on. Okay, and how do you open the file using Excel? I think you just go to the folder where the file is saved and you double click on the file, right? That's what you do. So this is a a programmatic way of doing that. You're telling that go to this path and then read pd.read CSV is basically read CSV is a command that reads this particular file, right? So go to this path and then read this particular file. That is the purpose of this particular piece of code. Okay. Now, why is this read so powerful? What is so big deal about reading a file, right? You have been reading files for so long. The thing is, whenever you double click on an Excel file, it tries to get the entire file into the memory, okay, into the RAM of the computer, and then it shows you this thing. Also, some of you may know this, that there is a maximum limit on the number of rows an Excel sheet can have for MS Excel to open that file. And I'm just giving an example of MS Excel because it's the most commonly used software. But the same thing applies to Google Sheets as well. So imagine if you really have a very big data set, right? And these days, it's very easy to get a data set that has like, I don't know, 1 million rows or 10 million, trillions of rows. And this is very common. It's not an unheard of thing, okay? So if you have a data set like that, if you try to open it with Excel, first of all, if the data set has rows more than the maximum rows allowed by Excel, it's just not going to open it. That's it, right? You double click it, your Excel will freeze and it will just simply not open the file. So you will not be able to do anything with it, right? So this is one of the reasons why we should use Python, because it gives you that flexibility to also open very large files, okay? And why do you get that flexibility? It's because of this particular command here, nrows. Okay, I mean there's more to it as well, but nrows is actually very important. So what it is doing is that it is trying to read the first 300 rows of the file. This gives you that power. Okay, so if you suspect that from your file size that your file is huge, let's say if your file is, I don't know, 4 gigabytes, okay, and your RAM is like 2 GB. Well, the file is not going. It's going to be very difficult to open the file, even if Excel limitation is not reached. Okay, Excel is going to be very slow and so on. What nrows does is it reads the first 300 rows. Similarly, you can also do skip rows. You can say that, well, skip first whatever 1 million rows and show me the last whatever rows, right? So that's what this nrows does, and it gives you a freedom to not just read the whole file, but it also gives you freedom to read only certain columns in the file. Okay, but right now we don't know the names of the columns, so that's fine. I think we'll come to that. The next important command that I have here is df.info. By the way, df is something called as a data frame. Okay, data frame is just like a structure. You can think of it. You can basically think of it like, it looks like an Excel file because it has some columns and it has some rows. Okay, and it has column headers. So that is a data frame. But a data frame is very versatile structure, and it can, you can do a lot of things with data frame, right? So what this command is doing is that it's reading this placements.csv file, first 300 rows, into a data frame called df. Okay, and what I'm doing here is df.info. So it's giving me this particular output here, right? So you can look at this output. What it is telling you is these are the names of the columns. So it has about, I think it has 15 columns, okay, 0 to 14. So 15 columns. These are the column headers. It is also telling you that it has 215 entries. So that means it has 215 rows. I was reading first 300 rows and it only has 215. So it is reading all of them. Okay. And then it is also telling me the data type. So just for the sake of simplicity, we'll just talk about two data types. Okay. One is going to be a number, which can be an integer or a float. Float is like a real number. Okay. Like percentages and, salaries and so on. And there are other things like something called as object, which is a categorical variable, right? Like male or female, or state board or central board, things like that, which are not numbers, but there are categories. So that is what we mean by object. Okay, so there are basically two types of data types here: numeric as well as categorical data types, right? And this is also interesting. It tells you how much memory it is using. It's using about 25 kilobytes of the memory, which is actually nothing, right? 25 KB is nothing. My laptop here has a significant amount of RAM, so it can easily handle it. And just so that I convince you that this is working, I am going to reduce this n rows to, let's say, I'll make it 100. Okay, so I'm going to make it in real time, and I'm going to hit Control Enter, so it gets executed. Now you can see the number of rows has become 100, so it has read 100 entries. Okay, and you can see that the file size has actually now gone down. So theoretically, if you have let's say if you have a computer that can only support 10 kilobytes, right, then what you can do is simply keep reducing these n rows, right, to 50, and now the memory uses only 6 KB, right? So whatever analysis you need to do, you can do it on these 50 rows of data, okay, and then you repeat it on next 50 rows. You don't have to get the whole file into the memory, and this may seem like an obvious thing, but this is actually extremely critical while you are dealing with large data sets. You do not want to get all of their whatever there is in the data set unnecessarily into the memory in one step. Okay, so Python lets you split this thing out, right? So I'm going to now just increase it up to 300. So now I have this data frame, which is this is how it looks like. It has these columns and it has 215 rows, and it's a fairly small data frame. Okay, since I wanted to use the data given to me and the data that would be of relevance and interest to you, I have decided to use this. I could have used a much bigger data set as well. Now let's look at, let me see if there are any questions so far. Okay, so not yet, fine. So I'm going to go to the next command now. Okay, so our first task, okay, just let's get at a higher level again. Our task is to address this question: what's the typical salary offered to an MBA graduate? Okay, and we are trying to get a overview of the entire data set. We already saw what happens with df.info command, and it gives you a nice overview of things. Now there's another command to get a better overview of data, or different kind of overview, which is called df.describe. So that translates to data frame.describe. What it does is it gets the numeric columns. So in this case, all the columns that have this float 64 or int 64 associated with it, right? Only those columns are considered for df.describe. You can see those columns are now here, okay? And these rows are something that, these are statistical parameters, okay? So for example, it is giving you count. How many rows are there? There are 215 rows. What is the mean of each column? Standard deviation, minimum value, maximum value, and this 50% is median value. Okay, so let's just look at something that is of interest to us. Actually, let's look at percentage, right? MBA percentage. So this is a percentage of marks obtained by them in an MBA. I think not entrance exam, but this is the total percentage obtained by them in their MBA course. Okay, so you can see that mean percentage is 62% for MBA, right? Minimum is 51 and maximum is 77, and the median percentage is 62. Okay, there is a difference between so there's no significant difference between mean and median. Okay, mean is 62, median is also 62, right? So this can be a fairly normal kind of a distribution if we I think if we plot it. Okay, I think we'll try to plot it as well. We'll see. So this gives you a good feel of everything, right? So HSE percentage also, you can look at minimum, maximum. So minimum can go as low as 37, right? HSC also, SSC also minimum can go as low as 40. So this gives you an idea as to what is there a lower bar in terms of SSC percentage and HSC percentage on the students that are admitted, or bachelor's percentage on the students that are admitted into the MBA program, and it looks like that this is what the lower bar basically is. Okay. Also, you look at the lower bar on the e-test percentage, etc. Right? This can help you answer questions such as, okay, what's the typical percentage that people get at a business school, okay, and all statistics is over here. Also, interestingly, salary is also here, right? But note that this year salary count is only 148 as compared to 215 for rest of them. That's because some people don't have any salary because they were not placed, right? So only 148 students got placed. So their data is what is considered over here. You can see that mean salary is 2.8 lakhs. Okay. Maximum salary is 9.4 lakhs. Minimum salary is 2 lakhs. Okay. But one interesting thing to observe here is there is a difference between mean and median. Mean is 2.8 lakhs and median is 2.6 lakhs. Okay. So there's a difference of about, I don't know, I think 20,000, 23,000 rupees, right? This kind of phenomenon is actually very common, okay? So especially in places like, let's say IIT Bombay, where some people get paid, they get jobs overseas, right? So their salaries is in US dollars. And when you convert it into Indian rupees, it is obviously, it's a very big amount, right? And when people try to take average salary offered to an IIT Bombay graduate, they get these very high numbers because these averages are inflated because of these outliers, okay, or people who get very high salaries. In reality, median is something that is you should look at. What median tells you is that, okay, what is the salary if you look at the 50% of the class, okay, or 50% of the batch? What is the salary offered to that 50th individual? If you rank them in order of decreasing salary, what is the salary offered to person who ranks, basically halfway in that whole list? That is the number that is more representative and 2.65, and which can be seen over here, right? But again, so DS without describe, it just gives you numbers. So you have to really read these numbers, right, in order to get a feel of these numbers. It's often much easier to look at graphs, especially if you're trying to show it to your management and so on, right? It's always good to look at the graphs. So we'll start with the factor that is of most interest to us. So we'll look at the salaries of these MBA graduates, okay? And we'll try to answer this question as to, okay, what is the typical salary offered to an MBA graduate? Well, we already have an answer from here, but there is more to it than just what meets the eye, okay? That's why I would like to also do some visual analysis. Now, so I'm going to know SNS is basically just a short form for CBON, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to generate something called as a histogram of the salaries. Okay. Let me first again check if there are any questions. Not yet. Fine. So I'm just going to what I have done here is I have generated a histogram of all the salaries over here. Right. I hope you can see it, or what I'll do is I'll increase the size a little bit. Yeah. I think this is fine. Yeah. So you can see a histogram here, right? And I have simply used the CBON histplot function. Data is equal to df. That means it is telling that use the data from the data frame called df, which we have generated before, and use column called salary to generate this histogram. So on histogram, what you have on y-axis is the number of students in each bin, okay? And they have divided the salary into various bins. You can see that, right? This thing. But see, there are better ways to create histograms, and these are like this, okay? So you can actually control how the histogram looks. So in this case, what I'll do is I'll simply have just 3 bins or maybe like 5 bins here, okay? Instead of having so many bins. Okay, I think it didn't like it because of this thing. Yeah, okay. So I have 5 bins. As you can see, I have classified the salary offered to the students into 5 bins, okay, depending on their salaries. And this is how the bins are. And you can see that the distribution looks like this. It has a peak over here between 2 lakh and I think 3.4 lakhs. And then it sharply reduces. So these number of people who get this very high salary, like 9.4 or 8 or 7 lakhs, is actually very small, right? It's not representative at all. And you can see these bins are actually pretty big. So you can can just increase the number of bins so that you get a better feel of it. But in an histogram, whenever you start getting these gaps in the bins, that means you have reached a limit of, you don't want to further increase the number of bins, otherwise it will not, it will just start looking bad. And just to give you an example of a bad histogram, I'll just increase the number of bins from 50. Okay. So yeah, so you stop getting the feel of how it looks and so on, right? So you don't want to do that. You want to keep the feel. But see, one issue with these number of bins is that see, right now what it has done is it has divided the entire salary into some 10 bins. Pallavi, is there a question?
Yeah, there is a question.
Okay, yeah, I saw it. Yeah, I'll talk about that. Okay, matplotlib instead of Seaborn. Yeah. What I prefer is something called as bin width. Okay. The reason it is important is because people are going to ask you questions such as, well, how many people got salary between 2 to 3 lakh? Okay. And if you use 10 bins, then it's difficult because you see the bin is ending somewhere in between, right? So you don't know where it ends. So you use a bin width. You don't need to have a specified number of bins. Okay. You just use bin width of 1 lakh and see, this is the kind of graph you get. Okay. So it has basically just divided this salary by 10 raised to 6. Okay. So you have, this is between 2 to 3 lakh. So about whatever, I think some 100 odd people got between 2 to 3 lakh, then about less than 40 got between 3 to 4 and so on. So you get a very good feel of what is the typical salary a person is likely to get from an MBA school, and much better feel than these numbers max and min. You can see that this 9.4 lakhs is not at all likely. It's an outlier. Okay, very few. Even 5-6 lakhs is quite an outlier, right? This is the most likely scenario, and it's not a normal distribution, by the way, right? This is, so those of you who are interested in statistics, right? Normal distribution is it's often overused distribution. People think that most of the things they have to be normal, and when they encounter a graph like this, they feel that this is income inequality and things like that. Well, yes, it is income inequality, but this is also reality. In a sense, many physical phenomena which have nothing to do with human beings are also seen to observe or show a distribution like this. Okay, so this is actually very, very much natural. There's nothing unnatural about something like this. Okay. Anyway, so this gives you a good feel of it. I'm also going to show you a different kind of histogram, okay, which is called a cumulative histogram, and it is calculated by simply adding one more piece of line, cumulative equal to true. Okay, and I'll come back to that question in just a minute. Okay. So what it does is, so in the histogram here, what it is telling you is what is the number of people who have salary between 2 to 3 lakhs, right? So it is giving me this number here, and then 3 to 4 is this number, and so on. But if somebody is trying to ask me a question such as, well, give me a number in terms of salary that 90% of your class has salary less than or equal to that number. Okay, so is it 7 lakhs? Is it 6 lakhs? I want to have a number so that 90% of the class has less than that salary. That kind of thing is difficult to get from this histogram, right? But it gets very easy using a cumulative histogram. So it's a monotonically increasing function. It just keeps adding to the previous one, and this is basically counts, right? So I can also do something called as cumulative distribution function plot, okay, of this thing. And what it does is it see, look at this x and y axis. Y axis here is the proportion of students. Okay, 1 means all of the students, 0 means none of the students. So it starts at 2 lakhs, and then between 2 to 3 lakhs it increases to, I think, about 80%. So that means 80% of the class has salary between 2 to 3 lakhs. Okay, and if you increase your bar to 4 lakhs, then the number here goes up to 90%. So about 10% have between 3 to 4 lakhs, and 90% have a salary between 2 to 4 lakhs. Okay, so if you want to throw a number like what is the typical salary a student gets, well, you can simply say that there's a 90% chance that you're going to get a salary between 2 to 4 lakhs. and that carries a lot more information than saying just giving average numbers and so on and so forth, right? So this has a lot of interesting things. In fact, you can also do things such as, well, you know, what fraction of people get salary between, let's say, 4 to 5 lakhs. So all you have to do is just subtract the CDF values at 4 lakhs and at 5 lakhs. And you can get that here. It's going to be some 3% or 1%, something like that. Okay. So this is a different way to calculate the cumulative or a histogram. This is called a cumulative distribution function. And this also helps you visualize the data, right? So anyway, so to summarize, I think now we have a very good idea as to what kind of salaries do people get. We also have some idea about the outlier students and what is the average, minimum, maximum. And we can also answer questions such as, what fraction of class has salary between 2 to 3 lakhs and things like that. Okay. Now the question was, why am I using Seaborn and why not use Matplotlib? Well, again, I was asked to give a talk to a broad kind of audience. Okay, Seaborn is basically Matplotlib. So underneath Seaborn, there is Matplotlib, right? So I am essentially using Matplotlib, but Seaborn is a high-level cover or wrapper on Matplotlib, and it lets you generate these kinds of graphs with one-liner codes. For Matplotlib, you would have to write a much longer code in order to accomplish the same thing that you can do in one line in Seaborn. So it's easier. It's also quite powerful. But Matplotlib, of course, now if you want to generate a very customized figure, right, which is not possible in Seaborn, then sure, I recommend you can use Matplotlib and so on. But for all practical purposes, Seaborn is actually very, very powerful library that you can just rely on, and they keep adding different functionalities. So they have all kinds of interesting looking graphs, which I urge you to explore. Okay. All right, so I'm just looking at some of these questions here before I move to the next topic. So this is an interesting question. Is my sample size too small? Is the distribution skewed because of a smaller sample size? The answer is no, absolutely not. This kind of salary distribution, this is how it looks like. Okay, no matter, yeah, I mean, we have seen similar distribution at IIT Bombay for a very long time. And even if you look at any other data set, this is how it's going to be. See, the reason why it is like that is because there is no high bar. Okay, there is no high bar. Now, if we look at a salary distribution at a government institute, yeah, then it won't be like this. Then it will be I think it will be a very different looking distribution, because there is a high bar on what salary a director or even the head of the institute can get. But in industry, there is no such high bar, right? So there are things that are determined by the market, and then there are some exceptional candidates and exceptional circumstances that result in very high packages. So yeah, this is the distribution that is typically observed for salaries. Okay. And not just salaries, some other things as well. When you are looking at the lifetime of different products, so I work in reliability, right? So my area of research or area of interest is reliability modeling, and there we do see this kind of distribution very, very often. All right, so okay, so then now I'll move on to some other aspect of it, right? So we also wanted to, this is no. Yep, I think. So Pallavi, I have up to 6:30. Is it to finish the demos?
You actually have time till 7, but if you want to have a question and answer session, then 6:30 would be
Right.
better. So,
okay, great. Yeah, sure. So see, one tacit assumption in all of these graphs, this histogram and everything, is that we're plotting salaries, right? We're plotting, this is salary received, and you can see it doesn't start at 0, because those of there are people who have not placed and I haven't written their salary as 0. Otherwise, you'll just get a large peak at 0. It's not useful to analyze. You're not going to take that into account, right? While giving numbers on average salaries and so on. So, but there is a reasonable chunk of people who don't get placed, and we have to look at them as well, right? So, how do we incorporate that? So, what I have done here is I wanted to create one more column, okay, in my data frame or in my table or in my Excel sheet. I want to create another column called salary class, okay, and I'm doing this just for the sake of doing it because I wanted to show you a function called as, it's not group by, but it's just a capability of Python. I just wanted to demonstrate. That's why I'm doing it, okay? It can be done in a 1 or 2 liner code, but then it would be a difficult thing to describe. Therefore, I have written the code in such a manner that it is very easy to understand, okay? You don't have to write such a long code to do this. So see, what are we doing? So we want to add another column called salary class, okay? And by default, I'm going to use this letter U for all the rows. Remember, we have 215 rows. So U means unemployed. So let's start with calling all people as unemployed, okay? And then we'll start changing the rows. So what it does is, look at this. So it has a condition here. It's a if statement, okay? If the salary is more than 2 lakhs, and it is less than 2.25 lakhs, okay? So you call it a salary class of 2, okay? If the salary is between 2.25 and 2.5 lakhs, you call it a salary class of 2.25, and so on, okay? So what it does is, it goes in that data frame. Look at this df.log. So what it does is, it looks at this condition, okay? Salary greater than 2 and salary less than 2.25. Okay, it identifies those rows in that data frame, and corresponding to those rows, it assigns a value of 2 to the column called salary class. Okay. Now this may look like a fancy way of writing a simple for loop with an if statement, but this is actually this is the heart of Python actually. The kind of thing that I'm showing you right now, it's called vectorized array programming, and this is the reason why Python is so fast. Okay, so if you have a very large data set, a golden rule to write efficient code is to not use any for loops. Okay, absolutely no for loops. You should not be looping on your entire column, which has like 2 and 5 rows in this case, but in reality it can have millions of rows, because these for loops slow you down. Right? This is a vectorized way of doing things at high level, and this is also a smarter and faster way of doing things. People sometimes get pride in, in writing complex-looking codes, but no, that's actually wrong. You should be using efficient code that is easy to read and that is vectorized and that is fast. Okay, so here you can easily see that what it is doing is that it is just identifying rows in that data frame which have salary column between this number and this number, and depending on the value of those identified rows, it assigns a value of this to a column called salary class. Okay, so it just checks the salary column, make sure that or identifies rows where the salary lies between this first number and the second number, and just assigns a value of this to the salary class. That's what it does, and we have created different salary classes here, right? There's unemployed, there's 2, and I have it increasing in the steps of 25,000. So all the way to 3.75 and 4, and after 4 I have simply used something as greater than 4 because I don't want to go all the way to 9 lakhs. It will simply create too many categories. Okay, and I wanted to show you something else. So anyway, so I'm again going to use this data frame.info here, and now it gives you a feel of this data set. Okay, so here look at this difference. The salary column still has only 148 entries because the remaining ones are not numbers. There's nothing mentioned next to people who don't have any salary or who are not placed. But salary class has 2 and 5 rows. So that means even those who are not placed, they have a salary class associated with them, and that is the class U. Okay, so you see that this code has worked, and this is what has happened here. Okay. Now I'm going to use again a very interesting function called value counts. Okay. So I'm going to use a column called salary class in that data frame, and I'm going to do a value counts on that. What it does is it gives me how many entries are there for each class. So for you, it gives me 67 entries. That means there are 67 people who are not placed. For 2.25 class, it gives me 39 entries. So that means, I think 2.25 class means, yeah. So between 2.25 and 2.5 lakhs, there are 39 people, so on and so forth. And there are actually 10 people who have salary of greater than 4 lakhs, right? So again, this gives you a good feel of these numbers, but this is not a plot. So let's quickly come back to plot. Okay, so I'm going to use something called as a count plot in Seaborn. Okay, in which I'm going to have categories now equal to the salary class. Okay, and from the data. So don't worry about this order. This is not very important thing. So I just wanted them to in this order. So now let's look at this. Okay, so about how many? Some 67 people have they are unemployed, and then it gives you the number of students in your class for each salary class. Okay, so this gives you an even better idea of what to expect. Okay, including the students who are not placed. Our earlier analysis only assumed students who were placed, but now we have also incorporated that into this picture over here. Okay, so this gives you a more holistic idea of how the class has done over here. Okay, now one simple change that is necessary here is that, see, this count doesn't give you a very good feel. In order to get a feel, you have to remember how many total students were there. There are some 215 students, right? You have percentage here would be very useful, because people would like to know what percentage of folks got placed, and what percentage of people had salary between 2 to 3 lakhs. Again, those kinds of questions which we answered using the cumulative distribution plot can also be done over here, right? So and I also wanted to show you a function called group by, which is again a very powerful function. So in fact, I wanted to show you group by. That's why I have implemented something like this over here. Okay. And by the way, this count plot function uses group by underneath it. Okay. So count plot is again a wrapper provided by Seaborn. And by wrapper, what I mean is it's just a fancy looking cover on some ugly code. Okay. Yeah. So this is what it is. Count plot also uses group by, but group by is that core thing, which is a powerful thing. So let's look at what group by does. And actually, yeah, so after that, I'll again start talking about the data, and I'll not get into the nitty-gritties of programming here. If you're interested, feel free to get in touch with me about that. But let me again look at any questions that are there. Okay, there's a question about Moodle. I don't understand that question, so maybe I'll take that up later. All right. So, okay, so what group by essentially does is so see, this is an example of an elegant looking code. I'm actually doing a lot of things here. Okay, I'm doing a group by. I'm also sorting it. I'm telling that don't use it as an index. Then I'm counting. Then I'm doing some reset indexes. A lot of things that are happening. So I could, so this is actually a good thing. Once you get familiar with it, you can write one-liner codes which can replace 20, 30 lines of code that you may have to write using C++ or so. So essentially what this is doing is, it is taking the entire data and it is grouping them into these different salary classes, okay? And it is counting how many entries are there in each salary class. So for example, how many number of students have this salary class U, that means unemployed, okay? It does that for all of the salary classes, okay? And now we are creating one more column in our new data frame. By the way, this is df1. I have created a new data frame. In that new data frame, I have created a column called percentage, okay, which is basically these numbers that are there divided by the total number of students. So length of data frame, the original data frame is the total number of students, right? 215. So that's how I have used it 215 here, and then it converts it into percentage by multiplying by 100. Okay. So if you do a df1.info, it will tell you that it has three, these many columns. So it has this salary class, it has size, and it has percentage, and this is how it looks like. Okay. I'll actually show you something called as df.head. Okay. I don't know. So some error has occurred. Salary class. Just one second. I think I have to just execute all of these commands one more time, and then it should work out. Anyway, but I'll not get into that, because if I have to debug something, it will just take up some time. So anyway, so the point was to actually convert the this thing, right? This convert the y-axis into percentage. So what I have done here is, this was count. I have simply used group by to convert it into percentages. So now you get a good feel of what fraction of students were not employed and so on. So about 30% were not employed, and 10% had this salary class 2, and whatever 17% has 2.25, and so on. So it again gives you a feel of how the salary distribution is there. Okay, so these are different ways to look at the salary data and answer this question of what is the typical salary offered to an MBA graduate. Okay, so that was a simple question. We analyzed it in so many different ways. Right? So now I'm going to look at something else, a role of gender, okay, male versus female, and how that affects the packages that these students get. Okay, and this is just an excuse to show you some different kinds of plots that can be generated in Python. Okay, I am not this. The purpose is not to to make any controversial claims or anything. It's just to show you how to plot box plot. Okay, I'm not trying to send any message here. Just a disclaimer. I'm not a social scientist at all. So. Okay. Anyway, so let me look at the questions first. Okay, there are no questions. So good. So we'll keep going. So we want to see how a person's or a student's gender affects their salary, right? So what I am doing here is I have generated something called as a box plot here. Okay. Some of you may have seen these kinds of plots before. So y-axis is again salary. X-axis has two categories, male and female. Okay. And these are these boxes. So what are the boxes? Well, median, most of you would know what median is, right? Median is the salary offered to the, if you rank all these men in decreasing order of, let's say, salaries, then, if you draw a line in between, so 50% of the men would get a salary, the person who ranks 50%, let's say if you have 100 men, then person who is ranked number 50 would get a salary of this. So that is median. So the horizontal line here is a median. Okay, and this is a 25% quartile. This is a 75% quartile. So quartiles are basically these things that we have seen on the cumulative distribution function here. Okay. So 25% quartile means this point over here, 25, and 75 is going to be this point over here. Okay, so box plot gives you a spread of data. So what you are seeing here on an x-axis, okay, so if I draw this thing here, is going to be some 2.5 lakhs, and if I draw it at 75%, it's going to be some 3 lakhs something. So this horizontal spread is basically plotted vertically in a box plot. Okay, that gives you an idea of how the data is spreading, right? And these are, by the way, the maximum and minimum values. Okay, and well, not exactly maximum and minimum, because I'll come to this point called as outliers. Okay, but you can, for time being, just think of these horizontal lines as maximum and minimum values. Why are they important? Because you can't simply compare the averages and make a comment about it. Okay, because the variation is also important. The standard deviation in the data is also important. You can't just simply look at averages or medians or just the maximas or minimas, right? If I just look at these horizontal bars as maximas in this case, I'll simply say that, well, look, woman, the maximum salary offered to a woman student was more than that offered to men. So therefore, this is all good and women are actually getting better salaries. Is that a right statement? I don't know. I mean, if I look at just the medians, it will reverse. Median salary offered to a man is actually higher than that offered to a female student, right? If I just look at the minimas, well, they are very similar. So you can make a statement that, well, they both get similar salaries, isn't it? So the point is, spread of data is important. And in order to really know whether women are getting less salary than men, you have to apply statistical tests. It's not as easy as just looking at it and making a comment, but it is important to get a visual feel of the data, right? Remember, so our goal here is to get a visual feel of the data, and that's why we're doing this, right? Okay, so now Boxplot also has these dots. They are called outliers, okay? And outliers are important to be identified because these outliers often skew the distributions. So remember, in our case, we noticed that the average was actually quite different than the median, right? Mean was 2.8 lakhs and median was 2.6 lakhs. Why is that? It's because of these guys who are getting very high salaries. They are skewing the average in a higher or in a direction, that way the average increases, okay? So therefore outliers are important to identify and plot, okay? So this is how the box plots usually look. And see, here what you really see is that, well, yeah, there is probably some difference between men and women, but it's not very obvious from this graph to me, okay? If I run a statistical test, I won't be sure as to what the result would be. On the other hand, imagine a scenario where this entire box were to lie somewhere here, entire box, okay, with these whiskers as well over here. Well, then we can be quite sure that, look, I mean, entire distribution of men is actually below women, so women tend to get higher salaries, okay? But that's not the case here. There is significant overlap between the two boxes, so we need to have a closer look at it. And in order to do that, we are going to also look at one more column called specialization over here, okay? So there was a column called specialization. This is basically MBA specialization, I think, and in the data I have again ran a value counts on it, right? So it tells me what are the different values taken by this column called specialization. In this case, there are two different values: marketing and finance, marketing and HR. So these are the two different MBA specializations, and it also tells you the number of students in each specialization, right? So 120 in finance and 95 in HR, right? So now we're going to generate a slightly complex looking box plot which also has this specialization built in, okay? So we're still going to compare men and women, but we are going to separate the class into two specializations because these salaries can be affected by so many things, right? Just the gender is not the only thing that is affecting the salaries. What if one specialization is expected to get higher salaries than the other? In that case, it won't matter whether it's a male or a female student. So let's separate it out now. Now we have on our left side marketing and HR, and on our right side, this graph is for finance. Okay? So the left side, the first thing is HR, second thing is finance. And then, of course, the blue thing is men and the orange is women, right? So now one subtle thing that you can notice over here is that, see, this graph, right, in HR, this box for men is actually, there is a difference in the box. The box is at slightly higher level than this orange box for HR. On the other hand, for finance, you don't really see much of a difference, right? Look at these levels of these boxes. They basically overlap with each other, okay? So what it tells me is that, yeah, there is likely to be difference in the salaries offered to male students, especially in this HR specialization, okay? The jobs that people get in the HR specialization, men are likely to get slightly higher salaries than women in HR. On the other hand, in finance, I would be surprised if there is any difference, although the median is slightly lower, but there is significant overlap. So I doubt if this difference is statistically significant, okay? It's probably not, all right? Another interesting thing to note is that all these outliers that we had, right, that were affecting our salaries, see, most of these outliers are located in finance. Hardly any are in HR. So if I draw a line at 5 lakhs, you can see that outliers would only be present in the finance. So that means these very high salaries, people in finance are likely to get these salaries, and people in HR are unlikely to get these kinds of extraordinary salaries. Okay, this is another insight that we just learned. Although that was not our goal, we are trying to look at the gender bias. Right? But let's look at. So this is the same graph, right? So the good thing about this again, Seaborn category plot is that it lets you plot something on Y, something on X. In this case, these two X, and then also it separates things according to column, and it. So I can just switch this specialization and gender, and I'll show you how the graph looks like now. So now the first graph is for all the men, second graph is for all the women, and this blue thing is HR and orange thing is finance. Okay, so now we are comparing HR and finance, right? In this box over here, right? So as far as men are concerned, you can see that well, the salaries that these two boxes, they are more or less overlapping, right? So salaries that men get in HR and finance, they are quite comparable. But look at this difference over here, right? So this in this case for women, there is actually a noticeable difference. This box sort of lies below this box, so that means women in finance are likely to get more salaries than women in HR, and that is the reason why we noticed slight difference when we compared men and women. Okay, so somehow women in HR tend to get lower salaries than their counterparts in HR, and that is the reason for this slight difference that we may have observed. So that is another observation from this data. Although I must say that in order to make any kind of claim, you have to make sure that your conclusion is statistically significant. So you have to apply a relevant statistical test, and it is going to also give you a confidence bound. So your conclusion is only going to be valid for, let's say, in 95% of the time, and so on and so forth. And this is important because, let's say, if somebody tries to do things such as they want to file a court case, let's say, okay, based on this kind of, okay, there is discrimination, and they want to file a court case. Look at this graph, right? Women are getting less salaries. Let's file a court case. Will the court case stand with this graph? It won't. It absolutely won't, because in order for you to make a claim that is reasonable, it has to be statistically significant. And that is not the topic of this talk, so I'm not going to talk about it. But I just wanted to tell you that the story doesn't end here. Just because you see a graph that looks like this, that doesn't mean you have found something and you can actually go and run with it. Right? You have to apply sound statistical tests that would withstand, first they should withstand scientific rigor, and then not everything that withstands science can withstand the court as well. So that's another barrier. But anyway, so I digress. So I'll come back to this. Another interesting observation I wanted to make is that we saw that women in HR are likely to get slightly lower salaries, but what about their percentages, right? The MBA, the marks that they get in their during their MBA programs, right? So what I have done now is I have forgotten about salaries. Let's not talk about salaries. Let's just look at the percentages. So y-axis now becomes percentage. Right? So y-axis is percentage. First graph is for HR, second is for finance, and again, blue is men, orange is women. You can see that, I mean, the woman in both of these cases, this orange box is slightly above the blue box. Okay, so that means women are likely to get more marks in their MBA course than men. If I run a statistical test, I'm reasonably confident that that is what I'm going to find. You can see that visually you can see that the orange box has moved up. So women are likely to get more marks, but that doesn't necessarily result in higher salaries, especially in HR here. Okay, it doesn't necessarily result in higher salaries. So therefore, this is interesting. So salary is not just related to gender. There are certainly other factors at play, and we need to look at what those other factors are. Before I do that, I would like to see if there are any questions here. No, I don't see any new questions, so I'll continue. All right. Now let's look at what other factors are correlated to salary, right? So remember, I had this first box plot, right? So I could just change anything here and get a different thing. So just to give you an example, so there was something called as degree. I think this was their bachelor's degree, and there were. So what I have done here is I have on y-axis I have salary, and x-axis these are 3 box plots with 3 different degrees, bachelor degrees. So these are people in science and technology. These are, I think, communication and management degree, and then these are other degrees. Okay. So yeah, this is what it gives you some feel. I mean, you can use whatever you want here. So for example, I can write SSC board, and it will give me some graph. Obviously, I don't expect their salaries to be dependent on their SSC board, right? So obviously you see that there is hardly any difference. These 2 boxes simply overlap with each other. Similarly, if I use an HSC board, you have other boards and central board, is hardly any difference between the boards. So the board, which board you have, that doesn't really matter. Okay. What about let's say things such as work experience, right? Let's look at the column. So I forgot which columns we have. So there is work experience column, right? And I'm only looking at the categorical variables here. Okay. So for the box plot on x-axis, you need categorical variable, and by categorical I mean something that does not take numeric values. It only takes certain values. Okay. Like work experience. Let's look at this. Again, it overlaps significantly. Okay. So if you don't have work experience versus you have an work experience, the boxes sort of overlap. But it is interesting to note that these very high salary people, they had a work experience. So maybe the work experience also played some role in them getting a higher salary eventually. Okay. So that was work experience. You can put whatever here. I can also put back gender, and it will give me the same graph that we discussed earlier. Okay. So this was for comparing the effect of categorical variables on salary. Categorical variables are like this. You know, they are digital. They're not numbers. They're like male, female, or different kinds of categories and so on. What about some other things like marks during SSC or marks during HSC? You know, how do they correlate to salaries? If we want to look at, then we are in the this thing where we have both variables that are numeric, okay, and we need to look at something called as correlation plots, okay, and that's what I have done here now. Okay, so it's something called as pair plot. So Seaborn has this function pair plot. If I were to write this code in matplotlib, I mean, this code would easily take up, I think, hundreds of lines. Okay, so thankfully it is there in Seaborn, and it's such a nice looking code. It's a complex figure, by the way. So I'm going to first zoom out a little bit, and I'm going to show you how to read this figure. Okay. So, but before that, Pallavi, can you tell me if you are able to read this text over here? Look at my mouse.
No, it's a bit blurry.
Okay. But can you even guess what this is? This.
I think it's salary.
Yeah, that is salary, but it is blurry, right? So, okay. Anyway, so I'll actually zoom in and out of this figure as and when required. Okay. So what it has done is, it has taken all the numeric columns and it has compared them with each other. See, before this step, we were only looking at categorical variables, right? If you look at this df.info, right, here we had 2 types of columns. Object is a categorical variable like SSC board, okay, which can be state board or central board, things like that. And then there are these numeric variables like integer, float, and so on, right? SSC percentage. Now we are trying to see how these numeric variables affect the salary, and how these numeric variables are also correlated to each other. So we also want to see, for example, is there any relationship between their marks in SSC and their marks in HSC and their marks in bachelor's degree and their marks in MBA? Is there any relation? So all those kinds of relationships may be of interest. And pair plot essentially gives you all kinds of relationships in just one big figure. So you can just look at and you can explore different correlations, and whichever correlations that you think are interesting, those you can separately explore in detail. So let's look at the pair plot again. So let's just, what I'll do is I'll zoom in and I'll show you what this is, okay? Okay. Uh, so by the way, in here, the blue dots are men and the orange dots are women, okay? Um, and let's just look at this simple thing here. Um, I hope you can read a little bit better now, okay? Um,
Yeah,
so
yeah, it is visible now.
Okay, so each plot that you sorry. Okay, I think zooming beyond a certain limit doesn't work, so I'm going to stop at this point. Yeah. Okay, so in this pair plot, you see that there are basically two types of plots. Okay, one is this scatter plots where you see these circular dots. Okay, all these things, and there is another type of plot where you see these kinds of distributions. All right. We'll look at the scatter plots first. In the scatter plot, you see the square, right? So there has to be some y-axis and x-axis, right? So what is the y-axis? In order to know what the y-axis is, you look at this particular plot and just draw a line like this. This is the y-axis. MBA percentage is the y-axis over here. What is the x-axis? Draw a line, vertical line. HSC percentage is the x-axis. And you can see that this is more or less linear. So there is a correlation. Guys with higher HSC percentage are likely to have higher MBA percentage as well. Okay. And similarly, people with lower HSC percentage are likely to have lower MBA percentage as well. Of course, there is some noise because this is real world, but you see that there is some correlation, linear correlation here. Right? Now, if I want to look at some other correlation, let's say bachelor's percentage. So this is bachelor's percentage, and what was this? This was HSC percentage, right? Yeah. So between bachelor's percentage and HSC percentage also there is reasonably good correlation. You can see there is if you have a higher HSC percentage, you're likely to get higher bachelor's marks as well. Okay. Now HSC percentage versus HSC percentage. Why is this graph here? Why not a scatter plot like this? Because it would just be a y is equal to x line, right? Because we have y-axis is HSC percentage and x-axis, if it is also HSC percentage, then this is becoming y is equal to x. So you just get a straight line like that, which is quite useless. In a sense, it doesn't give you any new insight. So what Seaborn does is, instead of plotting y is equal to x and a perfect straight line, it sort of gives you a histogram, okay, or a probability density function for this variable HSC percentage. Okay, so what it tells you is that this HSC percentage sort of peaks over here at this point. What is that point? I have to really look down now what that point was. It's about 60 to 70%. Okay, so for these blue people, the HSC percentage sort of peaks at between 60 to 70, and similarly for this red people, it peaks around 60 to 70. Red are women, blue are men. Okay, so it gives you a distribution of these things. And similarly, if you keep moving up, SSC, so 10th percentage and 12th percentage, it's also reasonably well correlated. On the other hand, what is not correlated? So this number was just a random number, right? Do you see a straight line here like this? No, it's just a random noise. Similarly, if you go down, E-test percentage and HSC percentage, not a very good correlation. Similarly, if you look at salary and HSC percentage, is there a good correlation? Not really. It's difficult to know, right? It's not as good as a straight line as this. Right? So what this tells you is that salary is a much more complex function than getting good marks. If you get good marks in 10th, you're likely to get good marks in 12th, you're likely to get good marks in your bachelor's, and you're likely to get good marks in your MBA. But that does not necessarily mean you're likely to get a higher salary as well. Okay. And it looks like there are some other factors involved in people getting higher salaries. Okay. That's the story that this graph is telling you. There are other interesting things as well. So, for example, I'm looking at gender here, isn't it? So look at this thing, okay? SSC percentage. For men, the SSC percentage peaks at around this point, okay? For women, it peaks at around this point. So women, from these two distributions, I think with reasonable confidence claim that women tend to get higher marks at 10th than men. Okay? Um, Now, similarly, over here, look at this MBA percentage. For women, it peaks at this number, which is higher than for men, which peaks at this number. So, women are certainly likely to get higher marks at their MBA than men, okay, during the course. As far as salaries are concerned, their peaks are actually very close. Men's peak is slightly higher than women's peak. So, it's a mode, by the way, okay. So, this is a mode of the distribution. Anyway, so this helps you analyze a lot of interesting things, and it's not just gender. You can also do this by using some other things such as specialization. If I do a specialization based pair plot, it just takes a little bit of time, okay, because it has to compute a lot of things, and it'll show up. 1 second. Yeah. Okay. So here is it. Okay. So blue is HR and orange is finance. So what do you see here, right? You just are finance people likely to get higher bachelor's percentage? You see, this is, I mean, you'll have to really sit down and analyze this data. Right? The reason why I had these, these two different color plots is because now you can explore multiple variables in the same graph. You can explore the correlation between SSC percentage and HSC percentage, and also look at if it has any effect on women and men. Right? So it gives you a very good amount of flexibility to look at the entire data set at once. Okay, and you can at least manually you can cast a wider net and identify which are the relationships that are of interest to you, so that you can analyze them in higher depth and run statistical tests or do some machine learning or anything. Okay, so this is important to cast a wider net. Right? Now, let's say if I want to, what I have found is that HSC percentage and bachelor's percentage is related, right? So I just want to plot it on x-axis. I just want to look at one graph now, right? So it is HSC percentage, y-axis is bachelor's percentage. You can see that it's a reasonably good straight line, and these women are in orange and men are in blue over here, okay? And I can also now have some different symbols for women in this case and so on, right? On the other hand, if I actually plot salary versus even MBA percentage, right? So it's salary related to MBA percentage. You don't see a very good straight line, okay? You don't see a very good straight line here. That means it's not a very simple correlation when it comes to salary. On the other hand, if you want to predict somebody's MBA percentage, their actually bachelor's percentage is also a very good proxy. If I do this, yeah, I get a reasonably good sort of fit. So those who have done poorly in their bachelor's are also likely to do poorly in MBA. But that doesn't mean that there is, people can't improve, because there are these things, right? For example, look at this person. Got 65% in MBA, even though the person got some 50% in their bachelor's. On the other hand, you can also look at somebody like this lady here. She got 80% or so in bachelor's, but only got 50 something in MBA. Right? So there are variations, and you can look at those as well. Now I'm see what I'm showing you here is that how you can actually look at multiple variables in the same graph. Okay, you are now looking at correlation between two parameters, MBA percentage and bachelor's percentage, and you're also looking at what is the effect of men and women, being a male and female, on this graph. What if you want to look at something else as well? Can you add one more variable to it? Well, people, in order to address that question, what people do is they generate a 3D graph. But personally, I think 3D graphs are pretty bad, because you can't play with the 3D graphs, and they don't look very good, and you can't get much out of them. So what is the way to generate or show one more variable on the same two-dimensional graph? So Seaborn and many other Python packages offer you a solution. What they do is they use something called a size. Okay, so they have already used up color, isn't it? They have used up color. So now what they'll do is they'll use up size. Okay, so what are we doing here? So I'm again plotting salary as a function of MBA percentage. I'm also using, you know, wait a second. So I don't want to have, let's just, to be consistent, we'll just use gender, okay? So I also have men and women. So men are blue, women are orange. But I also want to see what is the effect of bachelor's percentage on the salary. Okay, y-axis is salary, isn't it? What's the effect of that? And see, they have actually modeled bachelor's percentage in terms of the size of these dots. So the bigger the dot, that means bigger is the bachelor's percentage. Okay, so these are some of the biggest dots that you see here. So these guys have the highest bachelor's percentage, and some of the smallest dots have the lowest bachelor's percentage. Like this guy here has very low bachelor's percentage. Okay, so this gives you an ability to model or to demonstrate different kinds of factors or variables on the same graph. Okay, now it will be actually more useful if I do something like this. I use MBA percentage and let's say size is there. So I'm going to look at HSC percentage, bachelor's percentage, and MBA percentage for men and women on the same graph. Okay. You can see that this graph now looks more reasonable in a sense. Bigger HSC percentage points are sort of over here, and these guys here, those who have lower MBA percentage and lower bachelor's percentage tend to be here. Actually, MBA percentage is not correlated well. So let me do one simple thing here. Okay, I'm going to use just for the sake of argument, I'm going to use SSC percentage. Okay, so now you can see that all these smaller dots are located mostly over here. Those who have lower SSC percentage and lower bachelor's percentage and also lower size, that means lower HSC percentage, and those with higher size are somewhere located over here. Okay, so this is just to tell you that it is possible to plot more than 3 different variables on the same graph without generating a 3D plot. Okay, and you use something called as a size in the rel plot. Okay, so it's something called as a rel plot in Seaborn. Okay, and I have specified here as the size, use HSC percentage as a proxy for size. Okay. All right, so now having said that, let's also look at who is not likely to get placed. Before that, I'll just quickly check if there are any. Okay, there are a lot of questions. 1 second. So there's a Google Doc over here. Am I supposed? No, this is feedback. Okay, all right. So there are no questions as such. So I'm going to talk about who is not likely to get placed, right? So here, what we'll do is this U that I had gender, right, in the earlier demonstration. I'm going to now look at a placement status. So instead of just looking at male and females, we'll just look at people who are placed and not placed, okay, and see what kind of correlations do we observe. Okay? So in this case, what we see is this blue corresponds to people who have been placed, and orange corresponds to people who are not placed. Okay. Sorry. Yeah. I'll just scroll down. Okay. Now let's look at this thing. Okay. Who is not likely to get placed? So what we're trying to see is graphs in which these blue and orange things separate out nicely. That is what we're trying to see. Okay. So where do they separate out nicely? Let's just try to find out. Okay. So here. So let's just look at this here. Okay. SSC percentage. See, all of these orange dots are likely to be at a lower side on this graph. So that means they're likely to get lower SSC percentage, right? All these orange dots are likely to be on a lower side on this SSC percentage scale. So people with lower SSC percentage are likely to be not placed. Similarly, let's look at HSC percentage. This is HSC percentage, by the way. Even those with orange dots are likely to have very low HSC percentage, right? If I draw a horizontal line here at 60%, you will see that most of the orange dots will lie below here. Similarly, for bachelor's percentage, look at this. If I draw a line at 60, most of the orange dots will lie below 60, right? So this is interesting that people who have very low SSC, HSC, and bachelor's percentage are likely to be not placed. Okay, and this is also seen from this these graphs here, isn't it? So basically, what this is telling you is that HSC, the SSC percentage for people who are not placed is at a lower value than SSC percentage for people who were placed. Similarly, I think that is also sort of the case for HSC percentage and so on. On the other hand, if you look at the e-test percentage, e-test, what I'm told is that e-test is some entrance test that these people have to give in order to come into the MBA program. If you draw a line at 70, you don't necessarily see that all of these orange dots are below 70. So that means e-test is not a good proxy to predict who is likely to be not placed. Similarly, MBA percentage, it's actually strange, but look at this MBA percentage. If I draw a line at 60, I do have enough orange dots above and below at 60. So that means MBA percentage is also not a very good proxy. A very good proxy to find people who are not likely to get placed is actually their SSC percentage, their HSC percentage, and their bachelor's percentage, right? So if you want to identify such potential problem cases, what you need to look at is their history, okay? And if you have identified such people, then you can start giving them some alternative options as well, right? And this is only qualitative, right? We haven't even talked about what is the probability that when somebody gets less than 50% marks in SSE, that person is likely to be not placed. We can easily calculate those things and become quantitative as well. But before we do that, we need to cast a wider net and identify what are the qualitative trends in our data. Okay, that way we can then start asking smarter questions about data and what we can do with this data, isn't it? So that's the story of people who are not placed. What I'll do is I have reached 6:30, but I'll show you a demo of an interactive Python-based app that we have developed here. Okay. Now this thing is also fairly interactive, isn't it? I mean, you can just this placement status, right? So instead of placement status, if I write something else, I don't know, I can write any other categorical variable, right? And it will give me these kinds of plots. So it is also fairly interactive. The only thing is, in order to use this Jupyter notebook, you have to understand how to code in Python at least a little bit. If I give you this thing, you need to know, what to change and so on. And the reason I'm saying you need to understand Python is because if you accidentally delete something and it starts throwing errors, right? You should be able to fix those small things. So in order to use a Jupyter notebook, some knowledge of Python is absolutely essential. On the other hand, if you develop an interactive application, you don't need any knowledge of Python. And this can be useful when you're putting up a website or you're showing results to people who are not into coding and things like that. Okay, so I'm not going to get into details of what code was written to develop this. We don't have time for that. I'm also not going to talk about how it was deployed. I'm just going to show you its capabilities. Okay, so here's what we have here. Okay, you can see this is localhost. So that means, again, I'm using just my web browser. I'm not using any fancy software to do this analysis. I'm simply using a freely available Google Chrome and freely available Python in order to do this kind of thing. Okay, I have not paid any single rupee for any paid software in order to do this kind of analysis. And by the way, if you have Excel, you have basically paid for it, right? So Excel is a paid software. So I haven't used any of that for this. Okay. Now quickly, let's look at what are the capabilities of this interactive thing. What is the interaction? Okay. So see, again, you're seeing graphs here. And for the time being, I would ask you to not look at this circular pie chart. Okay. This is slightly confusing and not completely ready. So just focus your attention on this left figure here. It's a bar chart. Okay. So what it is showing you is there are two bar charts. So first thing is male students, and this second thing is female students. Okay, blue is not placed and green is placed. Now you can see that when I actually hover my mouse around here, it gives me statistics. So it tells me that not placed men are 39 and placed men are 100. So about 139 men are there, and out of them 100 have been placed, 39 are not placed. And women, there are 28 plus 48 women, and 28 are not placed, 48 are placed. Okay. This is good because you can already see an interactive nature over here. Okay. Now, what do we do with it? Look at this attributes thing here. Okay. What if I want to now generate something else? Let's say I want to generate a similar chart for specializations. Okay, HR and finance. In order to do it in a Jupyter notebook, I would have to change some lines of code, isn't it? Now, if you don't know how to code, or if you don't want to expose your coding interface to people, you do something like this. You just click over here. When I click it, it shows me these different options that I have, isn't it? I can choose. So what do I want to choose here? Okay, so we haven't implemented specialization here. That's fine. It's just one line of code. But let's, for the sake of this thing, we will look at let's say work experience. Okay, look at work experience. So now this is a work experience graph. Okay, so work, so gender is not there. We are only looking at placed versus not placed, with people who don't have work experience and people who have work experience. So the first thing is not play. This first bar is no work experience, and the second bar is people who have work experience. You can see that if people who have work experience, out of some 74, 64 were placed and only 10 were not placed. And out of the people who didn't have work experience, 57 were not placed and 84 were placed, right? So this is fine. This can you can quickly generate whatever graph you want. SSE board, for example, central board versus other boards. You can have whatever comparison you want, or HSE board for that matter. It's just a matter of clicking and then it generates graphs for you. So you don't have, it's very fast process. Once you write a code, you can simply generate any number of graphs that you want and keep saving them in your reports or presentations and so on. So this is the power of Python. I'll show you one more interesting thing here. Right now, let's look at a numeric variable. I'm going to show you bachelor's percentage, I think. Yeah, let's look at bachelor's percentage. Okay, so so what we have is, okay, we have one more thing here. So this bar here is a scroller. Okay, so it draws a line between. So in this case, what I have is people who have drawn a line at 65%. Okay, so this first bar shows me people who have below 65%, and second bar shows me people who have above 65%. And again, among those who were above 65%, 113 got placed and 19 could not be placed, and below 65, 48 could not be placed and 35 got placed. You can see how this actually varies when I change this percentage. Okay, so is there a question? No, right? Okay. I thought one of the mics was unmuted, but that's okay.
No, there are no questions as of now.
Okay, all right. Yeah. So look at this interesting thing. What happens now? Let's say if I reduce this threshold, okay. So below 62. Now I made this threshold to be equal to 60. Okay. Or I'll just go down and make the threshold to be equal to I think 55. Okay. So anyway, so this graph's actually flipped. Okay, and I don't know why. It's just some artifact of the code, but don't worry about it. Look at this. What happened here? So on this graph here, I have people who have scores below 55% in their bachelor's, and on the first bar I have people who have scores above 55%, and then above 55%, 148 got placed, 56 were not placed, but below 55%, all of these 11 people were not placed. So that means if somebody's score was below 55%, chances that they would be placed was basically zero. Nobody with a bachelor's score of less than 55% got placed. Okay, so that tells you that this is actually a very strong factor that affects placement. Similarly, for HSE board, there will be okay, so not HSE board, actually HSE percentage. So similarly for HSE percentage, that I can actually have a threshold like this at 70 or something, but I can keep playing with the threshold until I reach a point. In this case, okay, I think my point is some 55, again some 50-55%. If your HSE is less than that, then you are highly unlikely to be placed. Okay, so these are some of the interesting insights, and see, I don't have to write any piece of code. I can simply drag and drop things and these graphs automatically update themselves, right? So this is the power of Python and the kind of things you can do. Uh, you can actually, it takes some time to develop and some expertise to develop an application like this. But the advantage is that once you develop it, you can reuse it for any kind of data analysis. This, we had developed something like this for some other thing, not obviously not for this placement analysis. That data set I encountered for the first time. We just used the, the software that we had developed for analyzing solar performance data to analyze this. Okay, and then it did not take very long time, but it does take some time to write this from scratch in the beginning and some know-how as well. But it can be useful. So, for example, it is very easy to deploy something like this on a website. If you want to show it to an external world, if you want your students to play with the data, right? This can be scientific data as well. If you have an equation has some 5 parameters, you can actually let the students play with those 5 parameters, and they can see the graphs updating in real time. So that gives them a good feel of how each model parameters affect your output. And I use this extensively in the electrical engineering courses where you have multiple parameters and there is one output parameter, and you want to, it may not be obvious. Let's say if you have a diode equation, it may not be obvious as to how the diode currents change when I increase the ideality factor. So people can simply increase it here and then look at the effect in real time. So I personally feel that it gives it's a very useful aid for understanding, and it can be used in education as well in addition to data analysis. Yeah, all right. So I think that's all I had to show. Just to summarize, what I wanted to emphasize is that Python is a very versatile, capable, free, and reasonably easy to learn tool that is available, and you can actually develop a lot of useful and interesting things in Python. You can analyze the given data set. I'm sure this data set must be there for quite some time. You can analyze this data set to detect interesting patterns, learn about your students or any other phenomena for that matter, and then you can also get into this aspect which we didn't discuss called prediction. Okay, we actually did talk about qualitative prediction. In a sense, for us it would be very useful if we can identify that, okay, this student is likely to now lose track. If we can identify these students before, we can actually take steps and intervene at right time to make sure that they don't lose track and they don't become problem cases and end up wasting their and everyone else's time, isn't it? That would be very useful. So predictive nature can also be brought into some of these tools. But at the same time, I don't like to over rely on things like machine learning and so on. I think a human judgment is very important, because there are so many aspects and you cannot code all the aspects into your model. Right? There will always be some aspects that are not considered, and those need to be left to the humans that are taking decision. But these kinds of visual tools can be useful in developing your own insights about how, what are the hidden correlations between different parameters that are there in the data set and so on. All right, so if there are any questions, please feel free to write in the chat box.
So there are a few questions in the chat box.
Okay, I'm trying to look at the thing. Okay, so how do you know? There's a question is that, so from raw data, how do you know that it requires pre-processing, and what kind of pre-processing techniques can be done? So yeah, that's a good question. I think one of the things that you will have to do in the beginning itself is run this thing like df.info, and if there are missing values, it will show up over here. See this, it says non-null. See how it says non-null, right? So it says 148 non-null. That means remaining values are actually null, right? So that is one thing. The other thing is you need to first ensure that all of these numbers are same. So many times what happens is, let's say gender may be missing for some people, or some marks may be missing. So then what you see is there are discrepancies in these data sets, right? The data are missing and so on. So you need to look at that. You also need to ensure that things actually do make sense. So for example, in this df.describe, SSE percentages, right? So for example, the maximum percentage should not exceed 100. It doesn't make any sense if it exceeds 100, right? Sometimes what you see is that there are these just outliers in the data that are just wrongly entered or something. You may see percentage value exceeding 100, or you may see negative values here. So you just have to make sure that those things are corrected. df.describe can also give you a good feel of if there are any bad data points. Like, so this is 9.4 lakhs, this is fine, but sometimes somebody miss a zero. I mean, if somebody misses a zero or adds an additional zero, then you can get a super outlier point like 94 lakhs or something. So, or even 30 lakhs for that matter. So we need to then be suspicious of such data points. I need to go back and see if this is a real outlier or some problem. So this is actually a messy process. There's no and the problem with this is you can never be sure that there are no errors. All you can do is you can just slice the data in different ways to detect if there are any inconsistencies, and when you detect them, you correct them. But that's all you can do. You can never prove 100% that this is all correct, and that's the reason why bugs often sort of percolate in the software and so on. All right. Is there any other question? I think I have considered all the questions. There was a question related to Moodle, probably.
I think so that was for us. We are taking some quiz on Moodle, so that may be regarding that.
All right.
And anybody is having any question, they can please ask now. Okay. Okay, I assume there are no questions, sir. Yes,
Okay.
anybody has any questions? Okay.
All right.
Sir.
If there are no questions, then I would just like to thank SPID again for inviting me over here. And yeah, I enjoyed actually preparing this talk. I had actually never given a formal talk on Python-based data analysis, because as I mentioned, that's not really my area of research. Okay, I just use it. So I am not used to talking about it. This was in fact the second time. The first time was in that class which Pallavi was talking about, and this is the second time that I put something together. So yeah, this was useful exercise for me as well. I like doing this. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
So first of all, thank you so much for taking out time. And actually, the session was very, very useful. Not only you just showed the techniques via which we can actually give data, like make data live, like we can know what is there in the data. So much amount of things we have, and correlation, and so many kinds of graphs we could use to represent a very simple kind of data and just get information out of it. So I know you showed it for just the salary part, but it can be implemented in many other ways via which we can show our data, like exam results, or any other kind of information that we have can be presented in a very, very proper way. So thank you so much for giving us detailed insights and actually explain how to read the scatter plots. Usually those look very scary to be frank, but yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much for making it so simple.
Thanks very much again.
Yeah.
And by the way,
do we see a moment of our sir?
Sorry,
there is a presentation.
So go ahead.
Yes, sir. So actually, because of COVID or pandemic, we are not able to like meet. Otherwise, it would have been a great experience to have a face-to-face conversation. But here is a memento from our side, just a virtual one. So yeah, thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. I look forward to meeting all of you in person at some point of time once the pandemic is over.
Sure, sir. Yes, sure, sir.
Sure, sir. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Bye.
Okay, sir. So with your permission, I think we can end this session. Before all the participants leave, we need to give you some information, and yeah, so that's fine if you want to leave. We
All right.
just
Thank
haven't,
you.
yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Okay. So before you all leave, I got a query regarding Moodle from Ikrar sir. Sir, if you still have any issue, you can ask us the question right now. Okay, I think sir is not there. I
Well,
am
we'll
get
communicate, sir. We'll communicate.
Okay. Another queries we are getting regarding attendance. The feedback form that we are sending is the attendance itself. Moreover, we are also taking Google Meet attendance directly. That can be taken while the meeting is going on. So we will be comparing that at the end of the day. But filling the feedback form is compulsory. So again, tomorrow we'll have the session at 10. Please join at 9:50 a.m. And for today, you will have to give the assignment again, where you could write 3-4 points regarding what is the takeaway from the session in the morning and the evening. So any other questions, if anybody has, they can ask me, or else we can leave or we can end the session for the today. Okay, thank you so much for your time. uh, I am ending the session now. Thank you.
Thank you, madam.